Welcome to the Attractions Group Podcast, Episode 5. I'm your host, Ryan Suhr. With me is the infamous Don Helbig. Don, how you doing today?
I'm doing great, Ryan. How about you?
I'm doing really well. I had a really nice, exciting, relaxing week. How was your week?
My week was good. The weather was nice. Got to spend some time outside, and I had an opportunity to formally meet someone that's a pretty big name in the attractions industry, Rick Bastrop from R&R Design.
Rick Bastrop. That name sounds familiar. Is there any attraction that anybody that might know you might have ridden that Rick Bastrop was involved with?
Yeah, Phantom Theater at Kings Island, which operated from 1992 to 2002. So he was the brainchild behind that attraction.
Awesome. Yeah, that must have been a real honor to meet him. Phantom Theater is such a legendary attraction that, people seem to really, really love it and still adore it to this day. So I'm glad that, you were able to do that. I got to meet him very briefly, and he definitely fits the role. He's kind of like I wouldn't say gothic guy, but he kind of gives like a original Gomez Adams kind of look with like the mustache and the uh the suit and stuff. So really, really nice guy, and it was quite an honor to meet him. All right.
Yeah.
So Don, let's get right into it. So this is a topic that you're uniquely qualified to kind of discuss. So you've been in the PR business for 30 years. All right. Uh, so in 30 years, it's when it comes down to it, the biggest nightmare and the most difficult part of a job that a PR person would have is dealing with crisis communications. So the way that it's described, it's a matter of when, not if, something hits the fan, and you're responsible for kind of smoothing it out with the public. So Don, do you have any like initial thoughts about crisis communications, and like the role of a PR person within the crisis communications kind of situation?
Yeah, I mean, crisis communication is a very big part of what you're going to do as a communications pro. No matter where you work, you have to be prepared for the unexpected every single day. Uh, you know, During my years as a PR person, every day that I was driving into the office, you're always thinking of the different scenarios, different things that can happen. You always have to be thinking and be prepared because you never know when something's going to happen. And if you do it long enough, you're going to run into something that you're going to have to deal with. And then, there's always going to be those other little things as well, too, along the way.
Okay, so one thing that's always been a burning question for me is, if something were to go wrong, like any number of situations could happen, you have at least a few seconds to a few minutes to a few hours to prepare to come up with, some sort of battle plan. What happens when you get a call and you're caught off guard? Like, what would you say are your thoughts on that situation?
Well, that's going to happen more frequently today with social media and, fan sites and things like that, where before, just look at the news media. Back when I broke in, there was the print online, the print edition. It wasn't the online edition. So it wasn't like immediately something that they could post online with the story. So it wasn't going to come out until the next day. So you had time, more time to gather all the facts and make sure everything was accurate before that story ran. Now, if you get caught off guard, like I said, that's going to happen. What you want to do, you want to write down, the name of the reporter, get their number, tell them you're going to call them back shortly. You take a few minutes to prepare for the conversation, make notes, get with your internal stakeholders, find out what happened, and start crafting your response.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. So it sounds like preparation is key no matter what amount of time that you have, whether it's a few minutes or, a few hours. So how do you qualify a situation? Like, let's say a reporter calls and they say that they had heard on social media that something had happened. What are your next steps for making sure that A, it really happened, and B, that the story that they got is actually in line with reality?
Well, you have to be sure to determine what the topic is, what they're calling about. What do they know? Ask who else the reporter is talking with for the story. Are they talking to, fire departments, police department? Are they talk to anyone else on, that might have been in the park. Just find out who they've been talking to gather as much information as you can. And you also want to ask them what their deadline is, so you can get back with them in a timely fashion.
Yeah, so I guess in that regard, it's not that different from normal PR when you're working with deadlines and stuff. And, it comes down to getting the people exactly what they need to do their stories. Um, do you have to?
Yeah. Now, something that's changed though, Ryan. Yeah. Something that's changed though, Ryan, in recent years with social media, and that is the reporters more in a hurry. They want to get the news out there. They want to get it on their social media. They want to get it on their website, and they're able to make updates throughout the day. They couldn't do that before when it was just going in print the next day. So sometimes things aren't going to be as accurate when it first hits, and then later on, after you've gathered all the facts and been able to respond back to them, then it's finally going to be the story you want. But sometimes the story's out there that's not quite accurate before you get to that point.
So we've all seen this on the news, when it says like this terrible thing happened at this place. We have not received word from the park, or we have not received immediate word from this store or this zoo or whatever. In your professional opinion, do you have to respond to media inquiries, or is that up to you, or is there a strategy behind that? What are your thoughts with that?
I always believe that you have to respond to the media, inquiries, even if it's just to, decline your participation, even if it's just to tell them, you'll get back with them, but just let them know that you've received their inquiry.
Yeah, I guess a little goes a long way, especially with integrity and stuff where we received your inquiry, we'll get back to you is a lot better than acting like you didn't hear, or, giving the perception that you're choosing to ignore. Um, so yeah, things are happening in a hurry in a crisis situation. So let's say something happens, the media is on their way out, social media and fan sets are blowing up. How do you quickly prepare for this situation? Like, you mentioned that, reporters are they're in a race with the average Joe, the average Billy or Mike to get it up on social media. So, how do you prepare when everybody's in a rush for a situation that's probably not favorable to your organization?
Well, Ryan, you have to know what you want to communicate, and you have to know that quickly. You want to develop 3 to 5 brief key messages that you want to weave into the interview or your statement that you're going to give them back, whether it's email or text there with that response. And you want to have that information, those talking points, you want to have that in front of you nearby so you can always reference it. You also always want to think like a reporter. Ask yourself those tough questions, anticipate what the questions are going to be. If you're going to do an interview, be sure to rehearse that prior to the actual interview, anticipating those questions. And most important, I think, Ryan, is be prepared for that first question. That's usually going to be the hardest one you're going to have to deal with.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned that, you got to prepare for the first question because usually that's going to be the hard hitter of what exactly happened. And sometimes you might have to give an explanation for something that's not very favorable. So that's absolutely something to have in mind, as far as putting a media spin or controlling a situation, because, the subject matter here is crisis communication management. So sometimes things happen. It's not a matter of when, or it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. So, when you get into it and something happens that's, a bad PR, you've got to do either damage control or be able to spin or at least get the proper story out so, things don't run amok. So here's a 2-part question for you. So part 1 is, what are some of the do's when it comes to dealing with an interview on camera or providing a statement maybe by email? So what are some of the things you would suggest?
Well, you have to stick to your messages. Look for ways to bridge from the reporter's question to one of your key points from what you want and, what you need to communicate. If you're going to be talking to a reporter, whether it's by phone or, the reporters on property, you got to watch your tone, maintain a positive tone, but be realistic, be responsive, and also be factual. Use short answers. Why use 72 words, when if you were going to do, you want to answer in a complete sentence, but you want to keep it brief. Use analogies to bring your points to life. That's going to help make them more memorable for the reporter, more memorable for the audience. This is very important here, I think, too, is you want to say what you want to say and then stop. Again, that's essential. Just know when to stop. And if you're asked questions, there's different reporters there, and they're all firing off different questions right at you. In that situation, what you want to do is you choose the one that's going to best fit your need at that time, Ryan.
I mean, absolutely. Yeah, you made a good point of answer the question, then stop, because you don't want to say something that you didn't mean to say. Um, in a lot of cases, people kind of trip up once they try to volunteer too much information, I've noticed. So that's absolutely some really good advice. You mentioned that you want to use analogies. Can you elaborate more on that?
We just want to do something that's relatable, to what you're talking to kind of paint a picture.
Okay, so you're basically saying that you want to put it into a situation where you think that the average person can understand what's going on. So if it's something that's like
Yeah.
complicated with a ride or a show or some
Yeah,
sort
they
of
can
special
identify.
event.
They can identify with. Yeah, exactly. They can identify to what you're talking about.
Okay, awesome, awesome. So other side of the question, what are some of the don'ts when dealing with the media? With and once again, for those of you who are listening, we're talking about for actual inquiries and emails and on camera.
Most important is never lie or mislead a reporter. Your credibility and your park's credibility, it's on the line. When you're talking with the media, so you don't want to mislead them, you don't want to lie to them, you don't want to misrepresent the facts. If you don't know an answer, just say so. Never speculate in a crisis situation. Anytime you speculate, it's going to go the wrong direction for you. Never use negative language. I think if to be quoted as part of a statement, don't say anything, don't make it. Remember when you're talking with reporters, no matter what your relationship might be with them, nothing's off the record. Anything you say with an earshot of them, or you email them, or you text them, I think that's all fair game. You want to avoid the use of industry jargon. A lot of the audience isn't going to understand a lot of those terms. So, just use layman's terms there when you're talking with the media. Don't volunteer any unnecessary information. I don't think you ever want to do that. And the other thing too is, you don't want to say no comment, because that can, be perceived in a variety of ways when you do that. What you want to do is you want to provide like a three-part answer. You say something like, I'm sorry, but I can't answer that. Or, explain why you can't answer that. And then follow up, those two parts, with something like, what I can tell you is, that way you're able to bridge to your key messages.
So, this is actually kind of tracking back to, one of those things with, that you learn in high school, like history class, where there's some debate as to whether I don't know is a proper answer. So if somebody asks you a question in which you don't know the answer, do you give them the answer to a question in which you do know the answer? Or do you give them like some sort of response, like, we don't have that information at this time? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you can say, we're still gathering that information. We're in the process of gathering that information. We're in the process of gathering those details for you. But you just never want to say no comment at the end of the day with those, when you're talking to reporters. You always want to have something, but you can always go back to with what I can tell you. And what you can tell them is what you know up to that point.
Yeah, that's some good information. Would you say that no comment is kind of tantamount in today's world to the whole, like, we have not been able to reach them for a response? Do you think that in the eyes of the public that that's pretty much the same thing? Or do you think that the public sees a distinction between the two?
I think they see there's a difference. If you say they could not be reached for comment, I think that's different than saying that when reached for comment, they had no comment.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so you've been a communications pro since Wilson Phillips topped the Billboard charts. God, what are some of the techniques and skills that you developed from, say, like an agenda from where it might sound like unproductive, hostile, or irrelevant to an on agenda item.
Wilson Phillips, Hold On. I remember that song. Yeah, it goes back to 1990 when I started out in my career. But I think we kind of touched on it a little bit earlier. But blocking and bridging would be the two techniques.
Okay, so blocking and bridging. So why don't you give me some of the examples when we're talking about these techniques? Give me some examples.
Well, I think some samples of that technique would be something like, they ask you a question, but you say it's not our policy not to discuss those types of figures specifically, or you say what I can tell you is, or what is important to remember is, and what I'm really here to talk about is, that way you're able to reframe a question. Don't be afraid to reframe those questions that you're getting, Ryan. And you only want to block a question though if there's a good reason to do it. You maybe reframe the question, or you say what I can tell you is, or what I'm here to talk about is, but only block a question when there's a really good reason to do it.
Okay, so so for example, when a question might be particularly hostile, or if you believe it might be loaded, or if it's a question in which you absolutely cannot answer it. For example, there's some sort of incident in a park and somebody says, well, how many people were in the park today? Like, obviously, that's a policy concern from many different standpoints as to why to not answer that question. Would you say that that's a good example?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's reasons not to give attendance figures. There's reasons not to give, how many people might have been in a certain area of the park. And a lot of times you may not, if it's the policy not to give that information, there's also times that, you may not have those details at the time you're being asked it to. So it's always, just always stick to the facts, tell them what you know, what you can tell them now.
Awesome, awesome. So, in the news media, they're going to ask questions you don't want to answer. Would you say that it's acceptable to refuse to answer any questions?
I think the only way, Ryan, it's acceptable, the only acceptable way would be to block without bridging. All these things we've talked about can be applied, whether you're doing it on camera, you're replying by email, you're replying by text, but, you have to find a way to answer the question, without necessarily answering the question. Give them something what you can tell them about the situation. Just reframe that question, so that you can always do that. But there's just no way to refuse to answer a question. You just reframe it.
Okay, yeah. So when you've got, when it comes down to, I'm not going to answer that question. That's certainly not an acceptable. That's not an acceptable answer under almost any condition.
No, you never want to say that in email, text. On air, you never want to say, I'm not going to answer that question. You just want to find a way to reframe it. But, another thing to remember, too, is the communications person, they're the one, whose name is being attached to it. Internal stakeholders that are gathering this information. You're putting all that together to craft the statement and that. So there are times, it's going to take a little bit of time to gather all that information. And, the media wants to go now so they can get that story out there. And it's not always there. So you just have to do the best you can to keep providing updates as you learn more about it. And you want to make sure you just don't leave, when you first contact with a reporter, your first conversation, your first exchange by email with a statement or whatever, as you learn more, make sure you're following up and giving them the most updated statements, so that story that's appearing online or the next day in print or going on air that night is as accurate and factual as possible.
Yeah, that's some good information. Now, let me ask you this. So, in today's world, you've got the various different types of media. So in 1990, when you started, you had the Associated Press, and then, you had the newspapers and you had the television and stuff. Nowadays, the role of the PR person has kind of evolved to also, in a lot of instances, include fan sites. As well as let's say theme park information sites, and not to put those down because we use them for sources of information for our pick six very often. So when it comes to people that manage like maybe social media, sites involving your particular park or maybe the industry in general, as well as fan sites and stuff like that. What level of attention would you give them in a crisis situation? Because I feel like the trade-off would be that somebody like a television camera station would reach more people, but it would also be a little bit more one and done, while a fan site wouldn't reach nearly as many people. But at the same time, that's when people discuss it and, information and imagination start to run wild. So what are your thoughts on that as far as the amount of attention you would spend with fan-based news rather than professional news?
Well, it's exactly like you just said. Imaginations run wild a lot of times on the fan sites, and these enthusiast groups that have their own social media channels. So yeah, you do want to include them in the process because a lot of your audience is following those channels. So I think sometimes to keep it from spiraling out of control, and then the perception becomes reality a lot of times. So you want to make sure that they're in the loop with it, with what's going on, because they're going to have questions. They're going to start talking about it. So you have to keep them in mind. I mean, you're going to first and foremost, you have to deal with the reporters, but you still have to have these other outlets that are out there, all these enthusiast groups. They have to be part of that. At least that secondary level, that you want to make sure that the right message is getting to them as well too, because it can quickly spiral out of control. And then a lot of times that's where the media is, going to report on, because that's what they're hearing. So yeah, you have to keep them in mind, Ryan. I mean, that's a good point to bring that up, because, we're talking here about, the traditional news media, but there's so many more sources out there nowadays that are delivering your news for you.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I completely agree with that. And one thing that I noticed as having experience running a fan site is that it's not even so much reaching the few thousand people, or the several thousand people that you would reach with your particular story. A lot of it had to do with the fact that the news media, especially then, I don't know if it's true now because I'm kind of out of the game, but they would refer to my website to see if there's any information going on or any news with the park. And that wasn't to disparage, the park itself. It was just rather than, digging through sales messages and stuff like that to find out that there's like an event coming up, they could see like, oh, a lot of people care about this particular topic. And it was just an easier way for them to find it. So when it comes down to like, if something terrible were to happen at a particular park and there's a fan site involved, a lot of people are going to have interest with that and discuss it. And I think that that's going to bring it to the forefront. So if anything, it's going to make the story more prominent. So I do agree. There is a level of attention that needs to be spent on it. Not replying probably isn't a good idea for that.
No, I mean, you look today too, in Orlando, all those Disney, sites that are out there, they're all reporting these kind of, and that's what you're seeing the news outlets, referencing, is these Disney fan sites are reporting this and that, and that's how a lot of that news breaks in terms of what Disney's doing. And so, yeah, you have to be, mindful of that, and you have to give them that same consideration and make sure that, your key messages, what you need to communicate is being delivered to these fan sites as well.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. So any final thoughts on crisis communication? Is there anything that we didn't cover that you would give out for advice as far as, let's put it this way, if you were going to sum up everything that you said, obviously there's a lot of nuance and there's a lot of individual situations, but, if you were going to give somebody one bit of advice before they walked out there and, face the cameras for something terrible happening, what would it be?
I think what I would recommend for anybody that works in a communications position where you're going to have to be the one responding in a crisis is use that time in the morning when you drive to work to be thinking about all the possibilities of things that can happen, and just throughout the day be thinking about different things as you walk around the park. What if this happened? What if that happened? How are we responding? What do we need to know? And if you're always thinking about those things, you're going to be more prepared than if something just happens and now all of a sudden you weren't ready for it, you weren't expecting, you weren't anticipating. Always anticipate. As a communications pro, you've always got to be anticipating that something can happen. It's a 24/7, 365 type role. There is no downtime. You may be not in that day. You may be at home. You may be doing a cookout. and you start getting these calls and things, you always have to be prepared and understand that's a big part of your job. I mean, it's fun to go out and announce a new roller coaster and do those kind of things and do these teaser campaigns and that. But that's really a small part of it. I mean, your big thing is managing the message, that's being communicated out there, whether it's positive or negative. Your job is to communicate those key messages.
Awesome. Well, some great advice and information, Don. I really appreciate you, spending the time to teach some of the younger generations about what happens when things hit the fan. So, time to train.
Yeah, and everybody's gonna be
Oh
different.
yeah, I
Yeah,
completely
everybody's
agree.
gonna be everything's gonna be different too, no matter where you are. Sometimes, it's also gonna be the situation. There are times you want to go on camera. There are times you do want to talk, by phone to reporters. Other times that you just want to provide a statement. So there's a lot of different ways to go about it too,
Hmm.
and you really have to use the situation to determine what route you're going to use when.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that, and your market often kind of dictates that as well. So let's use two different examples. You've got the Orlando Sentinel, where the most important thing in the Orlando area is Disney. Let's not cut that any other way. All right. So they do that, and they cover Disney quite a bit, but at the same time, they've got other things to cover because they're a major city, right? Would you agree with that statement? Okay. On the flip
Yes.
side, you've got the Sandusky Register. So the most important thing in Sandusky is Cedar Point. So they don't have a lot more going on than that. It's a much smaller city. So they want every little Cedar Point story available. And that's Cedar Point and Cedar Fair and so on. So that's just, that's not a referendum on either one, but I would say that, that's a really good example of how crisis communications could be altered by, the demographics that you're in. And I mean, as a PR person, you would have to know the market anyway. So I think that's you would know that going in, or at least learn that very quickly. But I just wanted to throw up an example of how you said like it would be different for everything. That's just one example of how it would be different, let alone the actual situations too. So
Right.
awesome.
But for me, the biggest thing that changed, Ryan, over the years was, when I first broke in, you had time because there wasn't social media, there wasn't the online sites. And, by the midway point of my career, all of a sudden that was changing, that was evolving, and it became instant, that within a couple of minutes of something happening, it's out there. So you just always have to be prepared. Just every day something could come up. It could be little, it could be big, but you just always have to be prepared on the crisis side.
Absolutely. And preparation is key to success regardless. All right, so enough about this downer that you wanted to talk about. Let's talk about some good news. So it's time for one of my favorite segments in the show. There's only two segments so far, but we'll add more, I promise. And I'm talking about the Pick Six. All right. Don could not see that intro for those of you watching on YouTube, but I came up with a really cool intro for Pick Six. So if you're watching on YouTube, kudos to you because you're seeing something Don hasn't seen yet, but I'm sure he'll watch it later.
I can imagine it, Ryan, and it was spectacular.
Well, some of the pixels weren't sparkling. Christmas Vacation reference. Okay, so
That's right.
story numero uno. Uh, we got to find. Okay, story number one. This is a big one. So, Don, who did not see this coming? Hershey Park announces the closure of the Wildcat roller coaster. So, Wildcat is a Great Coasters International (GCI). It was their first ever wooden coaster, from what I understand, and it's aged. It has some growing pains, and it seems like a lot of the people that who were big fans of it started to kind of wish that there was maybe a Rocky Mountain solution, possibly, which seems to be the rumor. And then that day has finally come, allegedly. The park tweeted out, last ride alert, Wildcat will close Sunday, July 31st, so be sure to visit this month for one final ride. Any suggestions on what to do with this 3,100 feet of wooden track? And then, of course, Rocky Mountain Construction responded saying that they had an idea of what to do. So, um, Don, what are your thoughts on this? Have you ridden Wildcat?
Yeah, it was when it pretty much first came out. Enjoyed the ride, but like every attraction, everything has an expiration date on it. and all good things must come to an end, as they say. So it's at the end of the line there, and they have to do something else with it. They wouldn't be doing this unless it's reached that point to where you do have to make a decision on it. But it's always sad to see attractions go, and I can tell you that nobody at Hershey Park wants to get rid of that ride. So it's tough for them too, just as tough as it would be for big fans of the ride. But it's always exciting, to see speculation on what could be coming, and that's part of the fun.
Yeah, yeah, I completely agree with you there. It's so cool that obviously with steel coasters inherently due to the laws of physics, they have an expiration date, and you can either do major rehab or you can remove them, as we've seen for so many in the past 5 or 10 years or so. But with wooden coasters, they can either stay alive forever or they can be completely reborn. And I think that it's so neat that and we're talking about RMC as if it's a fact that has not been announced, to be clear, but let's be honest here, that's what's going to happen. It's neat because it seems like that's a very economical solution from what I understand. It's way more inexpensive than putting in a new ride, and then furthermore, it's rides that are very unique and they draw a lot of attention.
Yeah, and here's something else to think about too, Ryan. When rides are retired, is sometimes it's not always due to the ride coming to the end of its service life. There's sometimes when you're looking to put a new attraction in, you're a little bit landlocked, not a lot of space to work with. So what you start looking for then is guests vote with their feet. So you're looking at ridership numbers, is it still popular? Those kind of things. Now, I don't know, I'm not privy to what the ridership is of this ride or anything like that. But there's always a lot of factors that do get involved when it comes time to retire a ride.
Yeah, absolutely. Sometimes you're landlocked. But I think that a lot of it's evident. When you talk to anybody that's been to Hershey Park, they glow about all the rides. Nobody really says much about Wildcat. So I think essentially what happened was Wildcat had its peak. It's past its prime now. It's time to move on. So hats off to Hershey Park for making what was probably a tough decision, but good luck to them in the future with whatever future endeavors they may have for this ride. So that's pretty good. So Don, story number deuce.
Well, Ryan, a new Great Wolf Lodge is coming to Texas. It'll be in Webster, and it'll be the second Great Wolf Lodge in the great state of Texas. You ever been to Texas, Ryan?
You know what? I have never been to Texas in my life. Never been. Have you?
I love it. It's hot. Yeah, multiple times. I mean, it is just like I like it. It's hot, but it's a beautiful state. But anyway, we've digressed here. But it's targeting to open in 2024, according to the Fly social media post. The resort and water park will be at least 400,000 square feet of entertainment, lodging space with at least 75,000 square feet for the water park, plus 10,000 square feet for an indoor convention center facility. And I really think, when you're looking at that part of Texas, it needs something like this.
I agree. Have you stayed at the Great Wolf Lodge? I know that there's one locally to you.
I have stayed in, I think it's now 4 different Great Wolf Lodges, and I've always enjoyed the experience.
Yeah, for me, it's I've stayed in 2. I've stayed at the one in Mason, Ohio, and the one in Sandusky, Ohio. The one in, to be fair, the one in Sandusky was Lodge number 2, so they built their initial one, I think, in like the Wisconsin Dells area, and then they opened the Mason one not long after. I'm sorry, the Sandusky one not long after. So the Mason one is far more grand and luxurious than the Sandusky one. The Sandusky one's cool, and it has like that camping kind of like feel to it that they try to have, but it doesn't have the luxury. But from what I understand, the new ones that they've opened, like Atlanta, and like I think there's one in like South Florida that they're open, are just huge and 400 and 500 rooms and just a spa and stuff. So Great Wolf, when they opened that one in Mason, they had some growing pains. Remember, because it opened in 2007, and then 2008 the economy crashed. So when that happened, they almost lost the lodge to their creditor, GE Capital. Then now they've been bought up by Apollo, who in turn created a company with Blackstone that owns Great Wolf Lodge. But since then, it's when you talk about a leverage buyout, often that's bad news. But they've got such aggressive growth plans. It seems like they're opening a lodge every year, and that's $1 billion or more investment. So Great Wolf has their stuff together. It's always a positive experience. And the cool part is it's self-contained, so you can have a Great Wolf Lodge in Nebraska in the middle of nowhere, and you can still have fun because you don't really need to leave the lodge.
And highly recommend when you're staying overnight the omelets that the Great Wolf Lodge do.
Yeah, their food is really good, and it's funny because the one in Mason used to have Pizza Hut Express in the basement near like the water park. And now they have their own in-house pizza, which usually spells for disaster. It's like, okay, they're going cheap, but no, 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 not in this case. Everyone's like, dude, you got to try Great Wolf Pizza, which is kind of a funny thought, but it's a strange world we're living in. Okay, so Don, do you remember where you parked your car? I don't expect you to have an answer to that.
No,
Well,
that's
you're
always a
at your
problem.
house. It's probably in your driveway,
I spent a
but
lot of time. Yeah, I spent a lot of time circling around trying to find my car.
but when you're at Disney, when there's 87 parking lots and each one has 7 sub parking lots, it may be really difficult to find your car, especially if you know, you're from out of town and you don't know. But it looks like Disney has patented a new feature for their app in which they will use a feature on their app to help you locate your car. So that's really, really cool. So that feature is going to allow you to find your car if you're having an issue with finding it inside the actual parks themselves. So have you ever lost your car like at a park or at some other place, or because I've definitely done that before.
Oh yeah, for sure on that. I can think of a lot of parks where that's happened. To me, what I try to do is align with an attraction in the park when I get out of my car. That I can see that I'm kind of like straight on with that. That helps a little bit, but no, this looks like it's going to be a definite useful addition to this app.
Absolutely. Disney again, like, we talked about the locker system that they came up with, last time. And, that's a cool thing. Disney likes to do the innovation. I know that other parks have done that whole thing as far as having a feature built into the app where it does help you locate your car. I haven't found one that was particularly useful, but maybe they're the ones to do it. Because when it just shows a satellite view and it shows you where your car is, you can't distinguish that really. I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Have you ever been able to use one successfully?
Um, yeah, I mean, I guess to a degree. Not as much as you'd want it to be, but yeah, to a degree.
Awesome. Awesome. So, when we were talking about the perfect mobile app, that was a good example of another feature that could have gone on there.
Exactly. Well, Ryan, Hershey Park, we talked about them, a few minutes ago, but they're adding haunts to its October lineup. And this is breaking news from Theme Park Insider. We again touched on that a little earlier too, about how all these different fan sites and things, are involved. And here's one breaking the news for Hershey Park, that they're adding these haunts. They're going to call it Dark Nights. It'll be a new upcharge add-on to the park's Halloween event, and it's going to allow guests unlimited visits, to 4 new haunted houses. It looks like what is it? Darkstone's Hollow, Valley of Fear. I like Midway of Misery, as well as 4 haunted houses: Twisted Darkness, The Descent, Haunted Coal Mine, and Creative Chaos.
That's really cool. Yeah, I like that idea. The haunt stuff, there's such a big market for that nowadays that it's cool to see other parks kind of either getting into it or expanding it.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, become big business for parks is the Halloween event. You used to have your spring, your summer, and then if, maybe you did a winter event, But now, I mean, it is, a big part of your all parks marketing plans is now what they're doing in the fall.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, so yeah, two big things for Hershey Park to get it in front of people. So they got the Wildcat, whatever's going to happen with that, as well as their Haunt event. So that's really cool. So again, hats off to Hershey Park for a lot of ruffling a lot of feathers. Let's put it that way. Okay, so now I've got a news story that is a bit of a bummer. Not exactly crisis communication, but it's sad for me. So coming down International Drive, the Tower of Terror billboard is no more. And this is in Orlando. There was a Tower of Terror billboard that was probably 60 or so feet tall that was actually animated, and it had one of the cells or the doom buggies or whatever they call it, the elevators, popping up and down. And I always, that was one of the first things I saw anytime I would go to Disney. So it was a bit of a bummer for me to hear that they were tearing it down. But apparently they're replacing it with landscaping. So I guess, again, all good things must come to an end. So, Don, what are your thoughts on that?
I was kind of stunned, when I first heard the news. I mean, that is something that, it's memorable. It's iconic. Anyone that's going to Disney World, I mean, you go by that on your way into the parks. It's a signature type of a thing there on that drive. And, I was just surprised that, it was going, but, like you said, all good things there, must come to an end at some point. But it's part of the memories that I have of going to Disney World, seeing that and, seeing my daughter's eyes light up when she would see that. I want to experience that, those kind of things. And, oh, that was so much fun on the way out of the park. So, those are the takeaways that you have from something like that. I mean, it's just something in the medium of a road. But yeah, I mean, it's connected to so many memories that people have, millions of people have of Walt Disney World.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's almost like, there's the castle and there's, different things like that, that you see it and it definitely sparks it. But what's funny is, for Cinderella Castle and the actual Tower of Terror ride and Spaceship Earth and stuff like that, I feel like that there's a disconnect from it, and part of that is the result of the fact that not only do you see it in the parks, but you see a lot of pictures of it. Something like this, not a lot of people are taking pictures of because you're in your car. So your emotional connection to it is actually arriving at Walt Disney World. So I think that's why it's kind of sad. So,
Yeah, one of the first things you see, one of the last things, you know, it's got, two touch points there,
yeah,
or half.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So, Don, you are going a little bit crazy on, I don't know why you're resizing, but I'm all zoomed in on you. So I'm going to go ahead and fix this live here for some fun.
I didn't touch
No,
anything.
it wasn't you. This
I
is
didn't touch-
society's fault. But okay, I got you fixed. Okay. Okay.
All right. Well,
Last
our final
story. This
piece
one's all
of,
you, Don.
yeah, on our pick six, and it's happening, reportedly as we do this podcast here, but Wonder Woman Flight of Courage at Six Flags Magic Mountain finally has its opening date.
Yeah, yeah. So that's we kind of talked about that. Is it what's right now? So it's July 16th or is it the 17th? I think it's the 17th, so it's tomorrow. No, it's July 16th. You're right. It's happening right now. So I saw that some members of Ace and stuff did some media day things the other day. So
Mhm.
again, I'm glad they got it opened. This is a year-round park. I know I brought this up.
Yeah, 20th coaster there too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so this is like the Cedar Point of the West almost when it's competing for the biggest and the best roller coasters. But do you think that there are any considerations to have when for the timing of opening a coaster when you're a year-round park like that, or do you think that they just opened it when it was ready?
I think you open it. I mean, sometimes you want to have a certain time of year that you want to do something like that, and but when you're year round, you don't. There's no rush.
Hmm.
I mean, you open it at the time that's right for you, not at the time necessarily everybody wants to see it open. So there are those advantages there with that. Where if you're a seasonal park, there's a limited time, that you have, with your number of operating days. So it's more urgent to have it ready, more at the beginning of a year than middle of the summer that you might find elsewhere, like with a year-round park.
Awesome. Well, kudos to Six Flags Magic Mountain for opening that. I'm sure it's going to be a wonderful coaster. I'm glad they got done with that before they started attacking that Wildcat at Hershey Park, because that's allegedly what's happening. So I kid. So yeah, that was 6, man. This is a shorter episode, so it's a little bit easier to pack in. Don, do you have any final thoughts before we sign off for the week?
Just a fun time again talking today about the crisis communication, what some of the young PR professionals out there, what you want to be thinking about, day by day, as you arrive at your park, to begin your work day. I think some of these topics that we had to talk about tonight with the Pick Six were good. Yeah, I think it was, another fun episode with you, Ryan.
Awesome. Always a pleasure, Don. So thank you for taking the time to be on the podcast with me. So we did not plug this at the top of the podcast like we promised ourselves we would, but Twitter, follow us at attractions_GRP. So that's attractions_GRP. Look for us on your favorite podcast apps, looking for the Attractions Group podcast. And most importantly, right now, if you want to subscribe on YouTube, as soon as we get enough subscribers, and we don't know exactly what that number is going to be, it's in the few hundred, we'll start to go live, especially when there's big park news, and we'll start to discuss it live. So you'd be able to chat in and see what we have to say about different topics. So look for the Attractions Group podcast on YouTube. So Don?
How many followers are we up to now on Twitter?
Oh, let's see here. This is going to be embarrassing.
Now, a couple of weeks ago, we were at 1, which was me.
No, we're definitely better than 1. Let me pull it up. I got my phone out right now for you audio listeners. Yeah, let's see here. I have Twitter buried because I don't really use Twitter personally. I just use it for this. Okay, let's see here. We have 18 followers. Now.
All right, well, let's set a goal. By the time we record our next podcast, which will be episode number 6, we want to be over 30 followers.
Okay, so what can we do? What can we do, and what can the listeners do to help us achieve that goal? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think the easiest thing is what you said. Go to the to the Twitter account and just hit that follow button there. But I think too, what we want to do with it is, in time, we want to make this more interactive, and it's your opportunity to ask questions that you have, and the best way that you're going to be able to do that is going to be through this Twitter account. So the more followers we have, the more good questions that we're going to get, and the better that this podcast is going to be.
Yeah,
the more
I agree.
it's going to be.
One of the things that I'm really looking forward to is when we're to the point where we can start live chatting. I think that the goal that I personally have, and I think you would agree with it, is that I definitely want to do a live broadcast during the Golden Ticket Awards. I think that would be really fun to react to that live. So we would need enough of you guys following on YouTube in order to make that not embarrassing. So help us out. We'd really enjoy doing that.
All right. Well, good stuff, Ryan. Look forward to doing this again next week.
That's right. We'll do it again next week. So again, at attractions_GRP, find us on your favorite podcast apps. Search for the Attractions Group Podcast. Same with YouTube. Look for the Attractions Group Podcast. I'm Ryan Suhr with Don Helbig, and we are signing off for the week. Have a great weekend.